I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another Monuments Monday. And today, it is just a beautiful winter day here on Little Round Top. If it wasn't for some of the snow you still see covering the ground, you might think it's a early spring day. You don't even have to wear a coat. It's at days like this that you come out here and there are just great views of the battlefield. Today, I would like to highlight the monument honoring General Gouverneur Kemble Warren, Chief Engineer of the Union Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg. The statue here was dedicated on August 8th, 1888, just a little more than a month after the 25th anniversary of the battle. The monument was sponsored by the 5th New York Volunteer Infantry, the Dornier Zouaves, a unit which General Warren commanded for a time during the war. The sculptor was Carl Gerhardt, and the cost of the statue was $5,000. It is one of the first portrait statues erected on the Gettysburg battlefield. Of course, the first being the monument to General John Fulton Reynolds that is in our National Cemetery that was dedicated in 1872. But overall, this is one of the nicest statues on the entire battlefield, and certainly this monument has received a lot of attention over the years. The statue appears on the front cover of probably a dozen or more Civil War books. It drew the attention of all the early postcard manufacturers. We'll actually highlight some of these more interesting postcards as I talk. The monument was also highlighted at the beginning of one of our local news broadcasts for many years. I bet everyone who's local remembers that. Was it GAL, WGAL, Channel 8? You're welcome to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And of course, it was featured prior to and just after commercial breaks in the short-lived A&E series Civil War Journal. You may know I worked for Civil War Journal, and I'm the one who brought the cameraman up here and set up that image that appears in that show. So I'm really proud of that. One of my greatest accomplishments. And you know, a lot of people come up here in the evening because you can get pictures of this monument with the sun setting on the South Mountain Range. Of course, the sun is a little bit, farther over in the summertime. So this is General Gouverneur Kemble Warren. And yes, his first name is Gouverneur. He is not a governor, as I hear many visitors and unlicensed guides state on their tours. He was born on January 8th, 1830, so he was 33 years old at the time of the battle. He's born in Cold Springs, Putnam County, New York, along the Hudson River, not far from the United States Army Military Academy at West Point, where he graduated on July 1st, 1850. And like Robert E. Lee before him, he was second in his class. And like Lee, he was assigned to the Army Corps of Engineers. He served in the pre-war Army, and at the outbreak of the rebellion, he accepted a position as a lieutenant colonel of the 5th New York Volunteer Infantry, the Dornier Zouaves. Eventually, he became colonel of the unit, and then was eventually promoted to general, where he commanded a brigade. Under General Hooker, he was assigned as chief engineer of the Army. An interesting facet of General Warren's story is the fact that at the outset of the Gettysburg campaign, he obtained leave, traveled to Baltimore, where he married on June 17th, 1863. Just 2 weeks before the battle. He had met his wife, Emily Chase, while he was stationed in Baltimore in 1861, and while the 5th New York was camped on Federal Hill overlooking Baltimore's Inner Harbor. Of course, his honeymoon was cut short by the announcement of Lee's movement north, and he returned to the Army. On July 2nd, 1863, after General Daniel Edgar Sickles moved his troops to the advanced position along the Emmitsburg Road, General Meade and his staff rode out to talk to Sickles about this controversial movement. And when they were in the field out there close to the Trossel farm, Meade stopped, and Meade and Warren talked about this hill on the left flank of the Union Army. And in one account, General Meade suggests he rides here. In another account, General Warren suggests to Meade that he be allowed to ride here. And so Warren comes out to the top of this hill and looks over the battlefield. We have a letter written in 1872. It appears in Attack and Defense of Little Round Top by Oliver Norton. And the letter, General Warren describes the situation as he rides up on top of the hill. I continued on till I reached Little Round Top. There were no troops on it, and it was used as a signal station. I saw that this was the key of the whole position, and that our troops in the woods in front of it could not see the ground in front of them, so that the enemy would come upon them before they would be aware of it. The long line of woods on the Emmitsburg Road, which road was along a ridge, furnished an excellent place for the enemy to form out of sight. So I requested the captain of a battery just in front of Little Round Top to fire a shot into these woods. He did so, and the shot went whistling through the air. The sound of it reached the enemy troops and caused everyone to look in the direction of it. The motion revealed to me the glistening of gun barrels and bayonets of the enemy's line of battle, already formed and far outflanking the position of any of our troops, so that the line of his advance from his right to Little Round Top was unopposed. I have been particular in telling this, as the discovery was intensely thrilling to my feelings and almost appalling. Now, over the years, people have suggested that Warren was not being truthful, and there's actually a couple books out there that suggest that you can't see the sun glistening off of bayonets at the time in the afternoon, at the time they were lined up along those woods. But I can tell you this, in the summer, when I come out here and I give tours in the afternoon, I see constantly cars driving along that ridge underneath where the ski slopes are at the moment, and the sun glistens off of the windshields of the cars they ride along. And I think about General Warren's account and how significant this moment was. This was probably Warren's finest hour. Now, he's a chief engineer. He's technically not in charge of any troops. So he sends his couriers and his staff officers in different directions to bring reinforcements. And finally, he rides down to the bottom of the hill himself. And he is responsible for bringing something like 3,000 men to the top of this hill. And Little Round Top holds during the battle. And although General Sickles and his men are driven back, it's important that both ends of the line held. And because of this, he is known as the Saviour of Little Round Top. Now, eventually, he's named the commander of the 5th Army Corps in Grant's army. And Grant's not a big fan of his, and General Philip Sheridan actually had him released from the Army because of events that occurred at the Battle of Five Forks. And for much of the rest of his life, he was a major in the regular Army after the war and worked with the Army Corps of Engineers. But he tried to get his name, the charges that Sheridan had placed on him, dropped, and eventually his name was restored, but he died on August 8th, 1882. Now, if you'd like to learn more about his story, Mike Kelly, who was a National Park Service ranger here for many years, in 1997, he wrote a biography of General Warren that was printed by the Farnsworth House. And for anybody interested in the story, you can buy this at the Farnsworth House gift shop or at the Adams County Historical Society bookstore or online at our bookstore. There are plenty of images recorded of this site prior to the erection of this monument. And we'll show a couple of those. And there's actually a close-up of this rock. And in that close-up, there's a John Batchelder stake leaning against this rock. Now, again, we don't have access to John Batchelder's notebook that tells you what stake is numbered here at this location, but I suspect that it's the rock where General Warren stood during the battle. And people often ask me, what's the source for General Warren standing on this exact rock during the battle? And, you know, we don't have a really early source for it, but obviously someone told John Batchelder that fact. And according to our Gettysburg newspaper, the Star and Banner, on August 7th, 1888, the day before the dedication ceremony, the bronze statue of Major General G.K. Warren, already noticed by us, was placed in position last week on the boulder on which the general stood when he discovers Hood's attempt to turn the flank of our army and represents him at that moment. So the local newspaper, speaking to people, probably the men of the 5th New York that had the monument dedicated, were convinced that this was the spot that he stood at the time. Now, you might know my good friend Gary Edelman. He does a whole presentation on how this rock became very popular with visitors and veterans. And people were standing on the rock, and they were getting their picture taken with General Warren. They were hugging the statue, putting your arms around it, and pieces of the sword, the sash, the binocular strap, his stirrups over the years were broken off of the statue. And it was just too much. The Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association actually had a sign in front of this rock saying that visitors were not allowed on it after a time. And the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission, Gary even found correspondence that they were going to dig out around the front of the rock and put sort of a moat around it so people wouldn't climb on it. That never happened, but they did eventually put a bronze plaque on the front of the rock. Visitors forbidden on this rock. But even so, to this day, as a tour guide, you come up here and there are often people standing on this particular rock. I want to mention here that there's a plaque on the front of the rock. And you might walk around and see it. It's very difficult to go around, but it says that, the plaque uses a word to describe General Warren's discovery that I've never seen used in a book, and it's definitely not used today in common language. And the word is sagacity. Sometimes when I have tours with 8th graders, I ask them to go around to the rock to find this word. And they talk about General Warren's military sagacity. And what does sagacity mean? To be sagacious. So I should mention that Alfred Woad, he eventually printed a sketch of this scene of General Warren standing here and, making this discovery. And he actually puts it a little bit farther back where he's standing, and that sketch first appeared in Century magazine that eventually became Battles and Leaders of the Civil War in the 1880s. But undoubtedly, his sketches leaned heavily on a photograph taken by Matthew Brady in July of 1863 from the same exact location. And if you can compare the Matthew Brady photograph to the sketch, you can see that it's the same, and he was not up here sketching this location. An excellent discussion of that photograph can be found in Early Photography at Gettysburg on page 252, the book by William Allen Frasinito. I bet you didn't know Fraz's middle name. Next week, we're going to do a whole video on just the signal station and talk about that. But I did want to point out a few more interesting things, however. So, of course, this is the Jimmy Carter rock. And since, Carter just died recently, I think everybody should come up and stand on the rock that he stood on, I believe it was July 6th, 1978, when he came for a tour of the battlefield with Shelby Foote. And of course, this is the Eisenhower rock, just in front of the Warren rock, where Eisenhower took Bernard Montgomery on a tour of the battlefield when he came to visit Gettysburg on May 12th, 1957. And this is the balancing rock, and you can see it in photographs of the front of Warren statue just behind him. And this story I learned from a guy named Brady Emanuel Weichert, who was born in 1922, died in 2005. He grew up at the Weichert farm on the backside of Little Round Top, one of the post-war Weichert farms. His brother, Willard Clifford Weichert, used to sit in front of a house on Baltimore Street, if anybody remembers that. I think 302 Baltimore Street. I used to stop and talk to him because he and his brother were the great-grandchildren of Jacob Weichert, who owned that big stone farmhouse on the backside of Little Round Top at the time of the battle. And he was a wealth of information. Their father was Harry Grant Weichert, born in 1874, and during the 1920s, he was a Gettysburg National Military Park Guard who for many years was stationed at Devil's Den. And they told me that this postcard actually shows him standing in front of Devil's Den. They said that was him in that image. For many years, their family lived on the backside of Little Round Top, the two brothers. So this story comes from kids who grew up at this location. They probably went to Round Top Schoolhouse, which is just down the road here. But if any Weicherts see this video and they want to comment on this, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about any of the facts. So I knew Brady, and I think it was in the 1980s. He brought me out here one day, and he showed me this perfectly balanced rock. And he told me that this boulder, when he was a kid, used to rock back and forth when the wind blew. But after the construction of the new road on Little Round Top and the blasting of the ridge here with dynamite, the rock doesn't go back and forth with the wind. So just one last story. As a licensed battlefield guide for many years, I felt, as many other guides feel, that it's my job to police the Warren Rock. And I think on a tour of the battlefield, if you have the opportunity, you stand here with a group behind you, and then I can hold people from jumping on the rock because no one reads the sign. But personally, I can say that I have never been on the Warren Rock. Well, I was given a tour in 2005. I think it was the Blue and Gray Education Society. And there was this guy on the tour, and he had read some book that said Cemetery Hill was the aiming point of Pickett's charge, and it's a theory that I do not subscribe to, and we were arguing about it. And so after the tour, when he went back home, he wrote a blog about his time in Gettysburg, and he wrote about my tour. And he didn't say really anything negative about the tour, but he put photographs on his website, and you can still find it. Maybe I'll put a link to it so everybody can see what he said. And he put a picture of me and superimposed me on top of the rock with General Warren, and I got called into the office for giving a tour on top of the Warren Rock. Now, not that I haven't seen other groups, specifically unlicensed guides, give tours while they're standing at General Warren. In the summer, it's just chaos on Little Round Top sometimes. Remember, if you like the videos that we've been putting up on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe, and hit the bell if you would like notifications of our upcoming videos.